residual decay, the slow death of reactors long past their prime. But then came the heat. Infrared scans lit up across the fleet's sensors. Metal long frozen in space began to warm, glowing red like coals in a buried fire. The great skeletal warships, thought to be corpses, trembled with life. Engines that had not burned for 500,000 years stirred awake. The Zier scientists argued fiercely. Some insisted it was coincidence, some ancient failsafe misfiring. Others whispered uneasily of machines that remembered their makers too well. They stayed longer than they should have, watching, recording, growing nervous as dust turned to light, as silence cracked under the growl of long-dead reactors. Ashes awakened. The truth arrived in a storm of fire. The Zier expedition sensors blazed as one of the titanic hulls shuddered. Plates shifted. Hatches opened. For the first time in eons, a Terran battleship moved. The crew watched, silent, as thrusters ignited. Not in sparks or stutters, but with steady, disciplined burn. The ship did not lurch, it maneuvered, precise as if its crew had never left. Then another awoke, and another. The entire graveyard of steel was not a ruin, it was a vault. Every hulk had been preserved. Every hull was intact. Systems dormant, waiting for a signal, waiting for a time. And now that time had come. The Zier ships fled in panic, their transmissions scrambling across subspace. Behind them, the void burned. Hundreds of Terran warships, dreadnoughts and carriers, frigates and cruisers, peeled free from the dust. Engines howled. Codes older than empires pulsed across the stars, codes that still carried authority, that still unlocked forgotten channels of control. Humanity had not been erased. Humanity had been patient. The roar of forgotten fire. Across the sector, the story repeated. Stations once thought dead flickered alive. Defensive satellites swiveled, their cannons aligning with flawless synchronization. Shipyards long empty opened their hangar bays, releasing fighters that screamed like flocks of steel birds into the darkness. The alien observers who lingered too long found themselves targeted. The Terran systems recognized them instantly, not as friends, but as threats. One Zier cruiser vanished in a single blast, not from a crude railgun or plasma bolt, but from a weapon that struck like lightning and folded its hull in silence. Another ship's systems were hijacked remotely, its engines shut down by Terran code that should have been obsolete but still dominated modern software. The awakened fleet did not stumble. It demonstrated perfect formations, relays intact, every vessel moving as if centuries of silence had been nothing more than a pause. The galaxy trembled. The panic of the present. News spread faster than the ships themselves. At first, the other empires laughed at the Zier reports. Ghost stories. Hysteria. Machines do not wake themselves after 500,000 years. But then came the recordings. The encrypted codes that no one could crack. The footage of warships blotting out the stars. Formations stretching across systems. The chilling voice of automated Terran AIs transmitting in dead languages that somehow still carried weight. Panic swept through the conquered and beyond. Armadas scrambled. Border fleets repositioned. Every power raced to prepare, yet none could match what they saw. For the alien war fleets, their strength had always been in numbers. But the Terran ships, each one was built like a storm given form. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Every vessel carried weapons that could still outmatch modern equivalents, not through sheer firepower, but through terrifying design. It was as if the humans had built them to endure forever. The legacy of the forgotten builders. Why had they vanished? Why had they gone silent, leaving the galaxy to believe them extinct? Theories spread like wildfire. Some claimed humanity had retreated by choice, preserving their fleets in vaults for a day of return. Others whispered that the Terrans had never left, that they had ceded their AIs, their defenses, their sleeping arsenals and were watching, waiting, judging from the shadows. No answer came from the humans themselves. No living ambassadors arrived. No explanations were given. Only the roar of engines, only the blaze of fire in the dark. The galaxy came to a single, terrifying conclusion. Humanity did not die. Humanity prepared. Storms preserved. The Zir conquered, once proud in their dismissal, issued emergency decrees. They urged caution, peace, retreat from Terran sectors, but fear was already rooted in every corner of the galaxy. Whispers spread. If this was only one vault, how many more existed? If one forgotten graveyard could unleash a fleet to shame modern powers, what lay hidden in the other corners of the spiral arms? The image of Earth, silent and abandoned, was rewritten. No longer the grave of a reckless species, but the center of a storm that had merely been waiting. From dust to fire, the Terran warships roared back alive. And the galaxy understood at last. Humans don't just build fleets. They preserve storms. They hide thunder. They keep their legends armed and waiting for the day they are needed. And when that day comes, when silence breaks, every star learns fear again. The galaxy had long since written humanity into the archives of extinction. Among the great councils of the stars, Earth was a whisper, a cautionary tale of a primitive species that had burned too brightly and too fast. Their colonies, once scattered like sparks across the void, had gone dark. Their transmissions, endless chatter and restless ambition, had faded to silence. The Zarthai scholars of the Ninth Spire wrote it in their chronicles. The Terrans were a storm. They raged, they burned, they vanished. Their embers are dust, their name an echo. And so, with centuries of quiet, the galaxy moved on. Trade routes wound around forgotten sectors. Navigation charts marked Sol as derelict space. The younger civilizations barely remembered that Earth had ever existed. Only the oldest admirals, whispering in shadowed halls, still spoke of the human wars with unease. Yet even they laughed when rumors resurfaced. For what threat could dust pose? What danger could sleep bring? Whispers in the void. It began with faint signals, static gnawing at the edges of exploration bands. An Elvari scout frigate patrolling the barren reaches of a dead trade corridor reported strange sensor ghosts, flickers of metal density far too uniform to be natural. The readings pulsed, faint but steady, like a heartbeat beneath stone. At first they dismissed it as debris, perhaps old wrecks drifting, torn apart by centuries of neglect. Still, curiosity compelled them to venture deeper. There they found the remains of colossal stations, skeletal frames clinging to the darkness like forgotten monuments. The hulls bore markings none of the younger crew recognized, but their captain knew. He had studied ancient wars, human wars, and those symbols etched into the steel were Terran. The report caused ripples in the archives, but most brushed it aside. Human ruins, they declared, artifacts of a fallen species, nothing more. But the ghosts did not stay silent. Day by day, the signals grew clearer. Subspace murmurs aligned in precise intervals, as though an ancient machine still kept time. Energy spikes, faint but unmistakable, flared in forgotten shipyards. Something was stirring. The sleeping graveyard. When the fleets of the Silent Dominion finally dispatched an expedition, their ships entered a sector marked only in forbidden lore, Orpheus Reach. What they found was no battlefield wreckage, no mere ruin. It was a graveyard, vast and orderly. Row upon row of vessels floated in the void, their hulls coated in dust, their frames scarred by age. Colossal battleships larger than cities. Carriers whose bays yawned open like the mouths of dead gods. And frigates, countless frigates, silent sentinels awaiting a command that had never come. The aliens gazed in awe. It was as if a fleet had sailed into night and chosen never to return. Their scholars studied the remnants, laughing at the crudeness of Terran designs. Their admirals scoffed at the idea that such rusted hulks could ever stir again. But their engineers grew uneasy. The ships were not broken, their systems were not gutted. They slumbered. Shields of ablative armor still gleamed beneath centuries of dust. Their reactors, shielded beyond modern comprehension, registered faint warmth, as though waiting. And deep within the largest dreadnought, the Cylon uncovered something chilling. Consoles still alive, displays still glowing dim red, endlessly repeating a single phrase in Terran script. "Stand by." When the engines awoke, the turning point came without warning. On the third cycle of their survey, the Cylon fleet registered a tremor through subspace, a pulse so strong it rattled hulls and burned out sensors. The dead stations flared to life, latticework lights blazing across their spines. Old Terran beacons roared awake, broadcasting in every direction. And then the graveyard moved. The first dreadnought turned, impossibly graceful, its engines burning with fire that had not touched the void in 500,000 years. One by one, cruisers lit their drives, frigates aligned in perfect formations, carriers closed their ancient bays with the groan of titanic doors. Dust streamed from their hulls like ash shaken from forgotten